bit sassy, a little bit crazy, a little bit classy. We got dreams and we got goals. We're just a couple of old sassholes.
Well, hello, everyone.
Hello.
Welcome to a Couple of Sassholes podcast. I am Brooklyn Maple.
And I am Heather Terry.
And this is our awesome podcast that's about true crime and fucked up shit and like crazy things and not always true crime, maybe sort of with like a hint of true crime.
Yeah.
Like one time it
like
sat next to true
They could be
crime.
invited to the true crime family picnic.
Yes.
As like a cousin by marriage.
Yes.
Right?
That was very good.
I could tell by the look that you gave me.
Yeah, I was very
appreciate
pleased with that.
Yes.
That was great.
Yes.
So we're pumped. We're pumped. That's all I can say. We're pumped. I'm pretty sure I had like a bout of a stomach bug yesterday. So I am on the struggle bus of exhaustion today. And this is my story.
Yeah.
I have a story today. And so I am just pushing through, being positive.
She's a better woman than me. I'd be like, hey, podcast is done. Our friendship is done. Everything's done. I live in this bed now. So good for you.
Man, well, we're supposed to go out of town today. And so I think...
Where are you going?
We're going to French Lick. And Travis has no desire to go either. And
Indiana?
so he's like, he's like, we don't have to go if you don't feel. I'm like, shut up. We're going. So I have to act like I'm not. I think what it really comes down to is I'm just exhausted. I was up in the middle of the night for a long time experiencing things. And like, it was a journey that I'm just not pleased about. And so I'm just trying to like be awake and like sharp. And I just don't feel that sharp because I'm so still kind of like tired.
You know, at least it's not a hangover, right? We used to be.
Yeah.
And I mean me, would come in hungover.
Yeah, it's definitely not that. I can tell you that.
I was up having a crazy night watching 1,000-Pound Sisters.
Oh, goodness. Speaking of crazy things, I don't know. Segue. We're going to go see the new Winnie the Pooh movie, Blood and Honey, right?
Oh, my gosh. I can't wait. We saw this, where were we at? Oh, on the plane.
Is that where it was?
Yes.
There was some ad. We were going to Cancun.
Uh-huh. We were going to Cancun and we saw an ad.
Last year. In May. So I'm trying to say like how long it took for this movie to fucking come out, actually.
Yeah. And it finally did. On imdb.com, 4 out of 10 stars.
Oh, it's going to be so good. So guys, it's Winnie the Pooh and Piglet, but they're in a monster format.
First of all, Google it right now. We'll wait.
Yeah, so you can see. Just oh my God, look at the trailer. I remember the trailer because it was so utterly fucking terrible.
It was really bad. Okay, it says, after Christopher Robin abandons them for college, Pooh and Piglet embark on a bloody rampage as they search for a new source of food. This sounds like film gold.
Oh, I don't think anything will be better than this.
And I really want to have a cocktail in the bar at the movies before we go see it. No,
I'll bring a fucking flask. Yeah, that's what sucks. I'll bring a flask.
Yeah, and your shiwi.
Yeah, just pee in the corner of the fucking...
I'll get a big gulp. You're like, why are you getting a big gulp? Don't worry about it.
Just pee in it later.
We establish a pee corner at the beginning of the credits.
Okay, I think that sounds awesome. I think we're going to go see that next weekend.
I am so excited.
I have a lot of feelings about it, and I'm really excited for a movie that I know is going to be utterly terrible.
Yes.
And it's just going to be great.
Oh, it's going to be real. I didn't even know the storyline of that until I just read it.
We read it before, but I totally forgot.
I mean, 21 seconds ago, I forget, let alone in 2021.
I mean, I don't blame you. So I think we should probably hop into shit just because I think my story is pretty long and I'm also just here trying to fucking pull through.
She's pushing through. I gave her an out. I don't want to look like a podcast
Heather
bully.
always gives me the out. She's always like, hey, here's the trap door.
I'm just making sure. Gotta take care of my lady.
I am thankful.
Yeah.
But I'm also just pushing through.
If I'm like, you're like, you're fine. Walk it off.
That's 100%.
She's the mean mom. I'm the nice one.
Yeah. And I'm always like, can you not give me an excuse? I'm always like, no, I'm good.
I do it out of consideration, not out of like an excuse. You look at it differently. Different mindsets.
Yeah.
Different strokes for completely different folks.
All right. So we had a wild card. Let me talk about this.
Let's talk about it.
All right. We had a wild card. Don't look at my paper. I can see Heather looking at my paper.
I can't see that far, even though I do have my glasses on for one.
We had a wild card, and so...
I want to look at it so bad. I got to turn. Okay.
I picked the Costa Concordia disaster.
I don't even...
Okay, so in 2012,
a ship
sunk And it was very much like the Titanic issue. Like this is my storyline for this one was the Titanic reimagined. I was working at Royal Caribbean at the time, and Costa Concordia is owned by Carnival Cruise Lines. And when it happened, it was one of the most devastating things in the world because it is a horrible, horrible story. It's so sad, and it's basically one man's fucking ego and dumbassery and fuck-uppery that cost the lives of so many people that didn't need to die.
I feel like I vaguely remember seeing the headline.
So I lived in this, right?
Yeah,
It changed everything for the cruising industry too.
Wow.
And so I'm going to try to, honestly, I was looking it up. I could tell you the story all on my own right now. But I'm going to try to skim through a very lengthy Vanity Fair article. And there's a reason for this, guys. It's not because I'm too lazy to have pulled it, but this article was written by all the survivors on the ship. So the reason it's so, and that's what changes the perspective, because I can 100% tell you in 5 minutes what happened on that ship.
Wow.
But it's what happened on the ship told by the survivors that really...
Oh, I'm excited.
Paints this.
It's sad,
it's
but I'm
so
excited
sad
to hear it from that perspective.
But it's also just so salacious in its entirety too. Like you couldn't make this shit up. Like the captain, you just cannot make this shit up.
You have a $10 word on an early Saturday morning.
Bamboozles me. So really, I am truly. I went through and I was looking at the Vanity Fair article. I was like, okay, well, I'll cut out the perspective of all the people. And I was reading through it, and I couldn't cut any of it because it was just all. It painted just such a really aggressive photo of what was like happening on board the Costa Concordia.
You don't want to cut one and then not the other.
Well, I did cut some, so I highly doubt any of the survivors in Italy or Argentina or any of the places are listening to this podcast. If they are, my apologies if I ended up pulling anything out. I think we should scooch through. Keep in mind, a lot of these names and locations are hard because I live in Kentucky and not...
The attempts are being made.
Italy. And so I Googled a lot of them, and then I gave up. So here we are.
All right.
All right. On January 13th, 2012, at the Italian port of Civitavecchia, which is 40 miles northwest of Rome, one of the largest cruise ships that fit in that port was the Costa Concordia. Think of cruise ships like cars. They fit in specific parking spots.
Oh.
Yeah. So it's the largest ship in that port, but it by far is not the largest fucking ship.
Oh.
She was 17 decks high and was the length of 3 football fields. And as I was kind of mentioning, like a big ass Tahoe isn't going to fit into a smart car parking spot. So they always talk about how big the ship was, but she wasn't really that fucking big.
Well, yeah, that's good that you did that because people like me who don't have ship knowledge like you do.
Yes, I have quite a bit. Okay.
I know.
So this ship was doing something called interporting. And that is basically meant that on the journey, it could be like, it's usually done on long sailings. Let's say it's a 12-day cruise. People, whenever they stop in one of the ports, other people will get on.
Oh.
And that's not a common thing. But it was on, I mean, it is common, yes. But it's literally 12, 15-night cruises. It's not like someone's going to hop on a cruise ship in Bahamas and then come back into the U.S. And so basically crowds were filing on and off the ship. Those who boarded at Barcelona and Marseille, they were heading to Rome for sightseeing with everyone else. There were 1,500 luxury cabins, 6 restaurants, 13 bars. There was a 2-story spa, a fitness center, 3-story theater, 4 swimming pools. There was a casino, a disco. There was an internet cafe. All of it was in this 9-story central atrium. It was a huge sea of pink, blue, and green lights. Just like anything, some of the passengers thought it was gorgeous, and then other people, they quoted Americans, and they thought it was super tacky old Vegas. Other Argentinians were like, it was gorgeous, and then these fucking people from the U.S. were like, oh, it was super tacky.
Wow.
It gave me old Vegas vibes, is what they said.
Old Vegas.
Yeah. There were just over 4,200 people on board the Costa Concordia as it eased away from the water that evening. About 1,000 crew members and 3,200 passengers, including, just to kind of break down the countries that everyone was from, 1,000 Italians, hundreds of French, not British Russians, Germans, and then some Argentinians and people from Peru, and then some from America.
Peruvians?
Have you ever taken a cruise?
No, I have not. For no reason, not a fear or anything. I just haven't done it.
Yeah.
It's not like I saw Titanic in 8th grade and wept.
Well, we're also not by any seaports.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I like to travel. So
I get that.
You have taken how a million? Bazillion?
23.
Seriously?
23 cruises.
I didn't know that.
I can tell by your face. I've taken 23 cruises in the 7 years I worked for Royal Caribbean.
Wow, that's awesome.
It was very cool.
Yeah, we're doing that.
I know, and that's what I was saying. We should take a cruise.
Yeah,
I think
let's
it's
do it.
definitely our vibe. Maybe that'll be next year's plan. The hard part for anyone, you need to be near a seaport. I lived in Miami for 7 years, so we just went and got on a
You
cruise
can't
ship.
hop on one on the Ohio River?
Yeah, it's not as easy.
Oh.
So let's talk about muster drills. A muster drill is essentially like the portion on the airplane where you are told what you need to do in case of an emergency.
Okay.
Now, the difference is we have our headphones on, we're on our iPads, and we're reading books and we're not paying any attention. The muster drill happens after you've been on board for a little while. It's before you're going to set sail. So everyone's usually a little buzzed up. I've always been buzzed up on these, and you actually have to go to a location and you are required to go.
So they wait till people already get their first
Well,
drink
everyone,
or two?
that has to be right before they're going to set sail. So everyone's actually on the ship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yes, people have had drinks, but some people just got on the ship.
Okay.
And some people just don't drink.
No.
But they have to go to specific locations, and they have like a muster person, and they tell you how to get on the life rafts.
Mr. Muster.
Yeah, no, but yeah, why not? Why not? By the time the sun rises the very next day, of those 4,200 people on board, 32 will have died.
What?
Yeah. The wreck of Costa Concordia was many things to many different people. To Italians who dominated the ship's officer rankings and made up a third of its passengers, it's a national embarrassment. Once the pinnacle of Mediterranean hedonism, the Concordia was now sprawled dead on the rocks in cold winter water. A lot of people, it really landmarked a moment in naval history. It's the largest passenger ship to have ever wrecked.
Wow.
The 4,000 people who fled its slippery decks, nearly twice as many were on board the RMS Titanic in 1912. That represents the largest maritime evacuation in history.
Wow.
Yes, it's sadly a story of disgrace. It also highlights the mistakes of its captain and certain officers. And basically, it's a tale of monumental human fuck-uppery.
Juicy.
Because none of it had to happen.
Stories like that piss me off.
Oh, this is terrible.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert. I'm going to spoiler alert you right now.
Okay.
The captain is in jail.
Good.
Yeah. It needs to be, in
I'm
case
glad you told me
anyone
that.
didn't know that, we were waiting. I remember 2012 like it was yesterday. Like we were waiting to see what was going to happen. Like you could not stop trying to figure out what happened to this captain
Wow.
because you had to know. And that's the other reason why I like going through the story, just how fucked up it is.
Well, I'm glad you told me because you know me the whole time.
I know you'd ask.
I'd be like,
I
is he in
knew
jail?
it.
Is he in jail? The whole,
Yeah.
like so annoying. So she's like, don't be annoying. He's already arrested. Let me
Yes.
talk.
Yes, he is
Okay,
in
continue.
jail. Okay. So basically, this is going to show Vanity Fair does an amazing job. And they do the account of dozens of passengers, crew members, and rescue workers. That's what they had mentioned too. It's really important for everyone to understand like what went wrong. The ship's officers had been largely muted. They were told by the superiors at Costa Concordia, which was once more Carnival Cruise Lines, to not talk to anyone. Just so you know, everyone fucking sucks. A lot of people suck on this. A lot of
Sounds
people
like
suck
it.
on this. Oh, let me tell you this. I almost skipped this part. It first sailed in the Tyrrhenian Sea from Genoese. Yes.
Genoese.
I almost ignored this part, but I'm going to mention it because I think it's important.
Okay.
It first sailed in the Tyrrhenian Sea from Genoese shipyard in 2005. At the time, it was Italy's largest cruise ship. And when they christen the ship, they take a champagne bottle and they like break it up against the ship, right? Mm-hmm. This one didn't break.
Oh.
Which they say is 100% an
bad luck?
ominous sign for like superstitious mariners that like this ship was going to eventually sink.
Wow.
So it sailed only in the Mediterranean, so no one cares about that. In command of the bridge that night is a 51-year-old Captain Francesco Schettino.
Shitty.
Shitty
Is he
Schettino,
shitty?
who we
Shitty
despise.
Schettino.
And that's what I had mentioned, that he was already in jail.
Good.
He's a decent looking guy, but he also has a little bit of like a pervy tint to him.
I gotta look him up.
Yeah, go for it. He was a safety officer in 2010, and then he was promoted to captain in 2006. And since September, he had done his second tour on board the Concordia. Among the officers, he was respected, though the retired captain who had mentored him later told prosecutors he was a bit too exuberant for his own good. Despite him being married, Schettino had a 25-year-old woman with him at dinner that night, who was an old off-duty hostess named Dominica Morton. from Moldova. Yeah. So though she would later become an object of everyone's intense fascination in the press, her role in that event was very inconsequential.
Okay, I gotta put my phone down.
Yes, please. The guy's a mega scumbag.
You can just look at the photo and...
Yeah, you can tell. So before leaving port, Captain Schettino set a course for Savona on the Italian Riviera, 250 miles to the northeast. As the ship steamed into the Tyrrhenian Sea, Schettino headed to dinner with Dominica, yes, his mistress. I want to make sure
just openly
we call a fucking spade a fucking spade.
Right.
Telling an officer to alert him whenever the Concordia closed within 5 miles of the island of Giglio. And I wrote that down. I think I'm saying that right. Giglio. There we go. Giglio. 45 miles northwest. So later, a passenger would claim that he saw Schettino and his friend polish off a decanter of red wine while eating. This story was never confirmed, but let me just tell you this. Everyone said this.
Yeah.
So basically what I want everyone to understand is Schettino was having a fucking affair, was with his skank-ass 25-year-old. I'm calling her a skank-ass. I don't know that she's a skank-ass, but if you're fucking a married man, you're a skank-ass to me.
Yeah, same.
So anyway.
Agreed.
And he's 51 and she's 25. So I already want to dry heave on this table.
He looks like her creepy uncle. Who,
right.
Like,
I told you he has a perv
don't
look
you
to
want to
him.
go swimming? You really want to go swimming? Why don't you wear the orange bathing suit like that?
He has a super pervy tint.
Gross.
Including his like fake tan looking ass. Anyway. So he's at dinner to sit at the captain's table is like a thing. And it's usually for people who have done like 100 cruises or something like that. But people saw him. So he was, let's like say he was very likely a little drunk. Okay.
I mean,
we need to just say it. So he gets the call and basically the ship is already kind of heading to Giglio. Like it's getting pretty close to it. The ship's chief maitre d', Antonello Tiavoli, was a native of Giglio and had asked the captain to perform a salute. Essentially, so everyone, a salute whenever you're up against a port, it's a slow drive by. They do it on all the cruise ships whenever you're about to leave a port. So essentially, you're pulling up. I wish that people could see my hand, but you're pulling up and then you're kind of kicking out your ass end, the aft of the ship. Yeah. And you're allowing the people who are at the port to see the full length of the cruise ship. And it's kind of like a, hey, look at how gorgeous the ship is.
Show them the old razzle dazzle on the way out the door.
Yes.
I always do.
As the ship made its approach, Tivoli, standing on the bridge, placed a call to Palombo. That is the retired captain, it turns out. He wasn't even there on the island, and which was a second home, whatever, who cares. After some chit-chat, he hands the phone to the captain, which Palombo told prosecutors, right? So this is his old captain that they called. They thought he was on that island, and they were going to be like, hey, we're leaving.
Yeah.
Bye. Some weird shit. And the dude's like, I'm not there. Whatever. And his fucking like homeboy hands the phone over to the captain, and Palombo, who's the old one, right? Yeah. He's like, he told the prosecutors that it caught him off guard. He and Schettino hadn't talked in at least 7 years.
Wow.
So Schettino hadn't bothered to call him after he had retired. So like he really didn't fucking care. And he said that the call like surprised him. I was even more surprised when Schettino asked me about the depth of the seabed in front of Giglio Island, the harbor area, specifying that he wanted to pass at a distance of 0.4 nautical miles, which is about 800 yards. I answered that in that area, the seabeds are good, but considering the winter season, when few people were on the island, there was no reason to go at close range. So I invited him to make a quick greeting and to honk the horn and remain far from shore. I want to clarify that I said verbatim, say hi and stay away.
So yeah, don't come show off, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
He's like, dude, no one's on the fucking island. Don't get close. Just
honk if you really insist, but
there ain't no reason
get the fuck out of here.
Exactly.
Okay.
Just then the phone went dead. It may have been the very moment that he saw the rock.
Oh, no.
Not until the ship had closed within 2 miles of the island, Schettino's officers told prosecutors, did the captain take personal control of the ship? So the whole time, which is common, the captain is the one instructing, but somebody else is driving. Mm-hmm. As Schettino recalled it, he stood at a radar station in front of the broad outer windows, affording him a clear view of Giglio lights. Different crewmen remained at the helm, taking orders from the captain. The maneuver that he planned was simple. Once he had overseen many, many times, just an easy turn to starboard to the right that would take the Concordia parallel to the coastline so that the islands, like I just told you, whatever. He made 5 crucial mistakes, and the last 2 were fatal.
Oh, no.
For one thing, the Concordia was going too fast, 15 knots, a high speed for maneuvering so close to shore. And while he had consulted radar and maps, Schettino seems to have been navigating largely by his own eyesight. A major mistake, in one analyst's words. His third era was the bane of every American motorist. Schettino was talking on the phone while driving.
Oh, man.
Schettino's fourth mistake, however, appears to have been an amazingly stupid bit of confusion. He began his turn by calculating the distance from a set of rocks that lay about 900 yards off the harbor. What he failed to notice was another rock, nearer the ship. Giving orders to Ben Jacob, Schettino eased the Concordia into the turn without event. Then, coming into a new northerly course just over a half mile from the harbor, he saw the rock below to his left. It was enormous, just at the surface. He was so close to Giglio, he could see it by the town's lights. Like, he was so fucking close.
So he did whatever he wanted, got cocky.
Yes.
And was buzzed.
And he was on the phone.
Right. So
he was already doing it. Mm-hmm. He was already too close.
Yeah.
He shouldn't have done it. Then, to his surprise, he sees a rock that he was never paying attention to.
Maybe if he wasn't drunk on the phone.
There's so many options. Right. So then he yells, hard to starboard. It was an instinctive order intended to steer the ship away from the rock. For a fleeting moment, Schettino thought it had worked. The Concordia's bow cleared the rock. Its midsection cleared as well. But by turning the ship to starboard, the stern swung toward the island, striking the submerged part of the rock.
Oh, no.
He says, the problem was that I went to starboard trying to avoid it, and that was the mistake, because I should not have gone starboard, he told the prosecutors. I made an imprudent decision. Nothing would have happened if I had not set the helm to starboard. Hard to port, which is the other side. Hard to port, Schettino commanded, correcting his mistake. A moment later, he shouted, hard to starboard, and then the lights went out. It was 9:42.
Whoa.
Many of the passengers were at dinner. Hundreds of them were in a restaurant. People said, then there was a bang, 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 bang. Then there was just a great groaning sound. I immediately felt the ship list severely to port. So it just super quickly starts just plummeting into the water.
Oh, okay.
So they're just sitting there at dinner. Dang. They hear loud bangs and then a groaning sound. That had to have been so ominous on this ship.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, the ship falls.
That's insane.
Dishes went flying. Waiters went flying everywhere. They said that women in heels just fell to the ground.
Oh, no.
Glasses were flying. It was 100% a scene from the Titanic is what some of the survivors said.
That's what I was picturing in my head.
Yeah. Someone said that they had just taken a bite of their eggplant and they had to grab their plate as it went to fly off. So all around diners surged toward the restaurant's main entrance. Some people, it quotes other people who were like, what were they doing? And some people actually ran out, tried to get out of the restaurant. And then one person, literally, they say, we stayed at our table. Recalls Pirelli is the last name of the person. The restaurant emptied and there was a surreal silence in the room. Everyone was gone. Somewhere on the ship, an Italian woman named Concetta Robi took out her cell phone and dialed her daughter in the central Italian port of Prato near Florence. She told them that the scene was chaos, that ceiling panels were falling, waiters were stumbling, passengers were scrambling to put on their life jackets, and she called the cops. As passengers tried in vain to understand what was happening, the captain stood on the bridge, stunned. An officer nearby later told investigators they heard the captain say, fuck, I didn't see it.
Oh, he sucks.
Oh, it gets so much worse, Heather. In those first confusing minutes, Schettino spoke several times with engineers below decks and sent at least one officer to assess the damage. Moments after the Concordia struck the rock, the chief engineer, I'm not going to say all these names, but I think Giuseppe, had tussled toward his control room. An officer emerged from the engine room himself shouting, there's water, there's water. I told him to check that all the watertight doors were closed as they should be. Pilot of one of the guys that told the prosecutors. Just as I finished speaking, we had a total blackout. I opened the door to the engine room and the water had already risen to the main switchboard. I informed the captain of the situation. I told him that the engine room, the main switchboard, and the stern section were flooded. I told him we had lost control of the ship.
Keep going. This is terrible.
I know it's I'm looking at times because I'm about to inform you of how quickly everything fucking hit. That was 9:42. At 9:57, which was only 15 minutes after the ship struck the rock, Schettino phoned Costa Cruises Operations Center. The executive he spoke to was Roberto Ferrarini. I don't fucking care. Who later told reporters, Schettino told me there was one compartment flooded, the compartment with electrical propulsion motors. And with that kind of situation, the ship's buoyancy was not compromised.
What? So he lied?
His voice was quite clear and calm.
How?
This is what I'm telling you. He wrecked the ship,
and he
then
tell
lied
anybody.
and didn't tell anyone, which cost everyone their lives.
Wow.
Like all the people that died because he lied about everything that happened on board the ship.
He's the worst.
But it gets worse. Between 10:06 and 10:26, they speak 3 more times. At one point, Schettino admitted that a second compartment had flooded, though he already knew about all that.
Yeah.
That was, to put it mildly, an understatement. In fact, 5 compartments were flooding. The situation was completely hopeless, and everyone needed to get off of the ship. Later, Schettino will actually deny that he had attempted to mislead any of his superiors in it.
He obviously did.
The ship was sinking. At that point, no one knew. So yes, it all vaulted, but I don't think anyone understood that the ship was taking on water as guests on board.
Wow.
So Schettino had a few options. The engines were dead. Computer screens had gone black. The ship was drifting and losing speed. Its momentum had carried it north along the island's coastline, past the harbor, then past a rocky peninsula. By 10 p.m., 20 minutes after striking the rock, the ship was heading away from the island into open water. If something wasn't done immediately, they were going to sink there.
Oh, my God.
What happened next won't be fully understood until the Concordia's black boxes were recorded and then analyzed. But from little Schettino and Costa officials had said, it appears that Schettino realized he had ground the ship. Evacuating a beach ship would be far safer than evacuating at sea. The nearest land, however, was already behind the ship at that point place that I had mentioned before. Somehow Schettino had turned the powerless Concordia completely around and rammed it into the rocks lining the peninsula. How this happened is not clear.
Yeah.
From the ship's course, some analysts initially speculated that Schettino used an emergency generator to gain control of the ship's bow thrusters, which are tiny jets of water used in docking, and allowed him to make the turn. Others maintained that he did nothing, that the turnabout was a moment of incredible luck. They argued that the prevailing wind and current, both pushing the Concordia back toward the island, did most of the work. So the ship was sailing out to sea when it was taking on water. Mm-hmm. Somehow, based off of what happened in the water, it turned and fell sideways onto the island, essentially, a portion of like the docking area.
Yeah.
Which put them a lot closer to a place where they could be rescued.
Well, I don't think that he did that. He sounds like a shit human, so we're just going to say that.
Well, other people too, like nautical analysts and experts, are like the bow thrusters. They wouldn't have been. Basically, I think people were hoping that maybe he had done something to try to save lives, but he hadn't.
Yeah.
We had this sexy guy, the way they described him is that he was super sexy, who had a great sense of humor, apparently, too. He is talking about how whenever he gets the call that the ship is now, that there's a huge fucking cruise ship sinking at their port, essentially. Yeah. And he said it was a quiet night. I was in Rome. We got a call from town outside of Florence. The party, Carabinieri, I don't fucking know, officer, which is a cop there.
Yeah.
Had a call from a woman whose mother was on a ship. We don't know where, who is putting on life jackets. Very unusual. Needless to say, for us to get such a call from land. Ordinarily, a ship calls us. In this case, we had to find the ship. We were the ones who triggered the entire operation. So, real quick, no one told rescue officers that a ship was sinking, but that woman who called her daughter, and then her daughter called the cops called the naval.
Nobody told them?
No one. So no one from the ship, no officers, no one said the ship was fucking sinking.
Why?
Because they were in trouble.
Well,
so they just made it 10 times worse.
Oh my God.
The first call, like hundreds of others in the coming hours, arrived at the Coast Guard's Rescue Coordination Center, a cluster of red brick buildings on the harbor in Livorno, which is 90 miles north of where they were. 3 officers were on duty that night inside its small operations room. And one of the people say, at 22:06, I received the call. They remember one of the night's unsung heroes, an energetic 37-year-old petty officer named Alessandro Tosi. He thought the ship was going from Savona to Barcelona. He called Savona. They said no ship had left from there. And then he asked one of the other cops, and then they figured out it was the Costa Concordia. 6 minutes after that first call at 10:12, Tosi located the Concordia on a radar screen just off of Giglio. So then he called the ship by radio to ask if there was a problem. Tosi recalls. An officer on the bridge answered. He said it was just an electrical blackout.
Oh my God.
He then said... The guy, I said, but I've heard plates are falling off the dinner tables. Why would that be? Why have passengers been ordered to put on life jackets? And he said, no, it's just a blackout. He said they should resolve it shortly.
Are you kidding? Okay.
I know, it's heart-wrenching.
Yeah.
The Concordia crewman speaking with the Costa Guard was the ship's navigation officer, a 26-year-old Italian named Simone Canessa. The captain ordered Canessa to say that there was a blackout on board. Third mate Silvia Coronica later told prosecutors. When asked if we needed assistance, he said, at the moment, no. The first mate... Another person, Ambrosio is the last name, who was also on the bridge, confirmed to investigators that Schettino was fully aware that a blackout was the least of their problems. The captain ordered us to say that everything was under control and that we were checking the damage, even though he knew that the ship was taking on water. Tosi put the radio down suspicious. This wouldn't be the first captain who downplayed his plight in hopes of avoiding public humiliation. Tosi telephoned his two superiors, both of whom arrived within half an hour. At 10:16, the captain of Guardia who fucking knows, the equivalent of U.S. Customs, radioed Tosi to say he was off Giglio and offered to investigate. Tosi gave the go-ahead. I got back to the Concordia and said, please keep us abreast of what's going on, says Tosi. After 10 minutes, they didn't update us. Nothing. So we called them again asking, can you please update us? At that point, they said they had water coming in. He asked what sort of help they needed and how many people on board had been injured. They said there were no injured. They requested only one tugboat.
Huh?
One tugboat.
For 4,200 people?
Mm-hmm. Schettino's apparent refusal to promptly admit that the Concordia's plight, to lie about it, according to the Coast Guard, not only was a violation of Italian maritime law, but cost precious time, delaying the arrival of rescue workers by as much as 45 minutes.
Oh, my God.
At 10:28, the Coast Guard Center ordered every available ship in the area to head to the island of Giglio. With the Concordia beginning to list, most of the 3,200 passengers had no clue what was going on. A briefing on how to evacuate the ship wasn't to take place until late the next day.
Oh.
So they didn't have their muster because they weren't doing, even though it was the interporting, only some people had gotten on the ship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
so
no.
Many, like the Ahoy family, streamed toward the lifeboats, which lined on all the decks, lined both sides of deck 4 and open lockers carrying orange life jackets. Already some were panicking. The life jacket I had, a woman was trying to rip it out of my arms. It actually ripped the thing. You could hear it. We stayed right there by one of the lifeboats, number 19. The whole time we were staying there, I only saw one crew member walk by. I asked what was happening. He said he didn't know. We heard two announcements, both the same, that it was an electrical problem with the generator. Technicians were working on it and everything was under control. Internet videos later showed crewmen exhorting passengers to return to their staterooms, which, while jarring in light of subsequent events, made sense at the time. There had been no order to abandon ship. When Addie King, who was a New Jersey graduate student, emerged from her room wearing a life jacket, a fucking maintenance worker actually told her to put it away.
What?
Like most, she ignored the advice and headed to the starboard side of deck 4, where hundreds of passengers were already lining the rails, waiting and worrying. At that moment, the crowd was still calm.
That's like the crowd mentality to where you just follow people and do what other people are doing. So like the crew that was told that that's what's happening, they were following what they were supposed to do and keep everybody calm. But if I saw somebody going, like if I was on a ship and I saw everybody with life jackets going to those boats, I'd go to those boats.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
I'm gonna listen to Tom that's in maintenance. Like
The fact that everything fell over,
yeah.
I'm not sure what they were seeing in those moments. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like what? But yes,
I mean,
grabbing
I've never
a life
been on a
raft,
ship, but that would be my
your assumption.
yes.
I don't know if everyone on the cruise ship, like if everyone on the cruise ship and all the crew were acting like nothing was happening, my confidence in the cruise line would have been, because I am a cruiser, if you will, would be to just sit there.
I would
like a
do
fucking
it.
idiot.
Actually, I would do what you do because of your background.
Yeah, which means all those
Yeah.
people who have been on dozens of cruises before, they would have been like, oh, I guess we're fine.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you think that?
Yeah, exactly.
According to John Conrad's analysis, it was here that Schettino made the error that actually led to many of the deaths that night. The ship was already listing to starboard toward the peninsula. In an attempt to prevent it from falling further, it eventually and famously flopped onto its right side. If you looked at the photos, Schettino dropped the ship's massive anchors. But photos taken later by divers show clearly that they were lying flat with their flukes pointing upward. They never dug into the seabed, rendering them useless. So what happened? Conrad says that it was a jaw-droppingly stupid mistake. You can see they let out too much chain, he says. I don't know the precise depths, but it was 90 meters. They let out 120 meters of chain. So the anchors never caught. The ship went in sideways, almost tipping over itself, which is why it listed. If he had dropped the anchors properly, the ship wouldn't have listed so badly.
And listed means?
Fell over on its side.
Okay.
So an additional error.
Yeah.
What could explain such a fundamental blunder, essentially? Videos of the chaos on the bridge that night later surfaced, and while it sheds little light on Schettino's technical decisions, it says worlds about his state of mind. From the video, you can tell he was stunned, says Conrad. The captain really froze. It doesn't seem his brain was processing anything. Schettino did make efforts, however, to ensure that the ship was firmly grounded, as he told prosecutors. He left the bridge and went to deck 9 near the top of the ship to survey its position. He worried it was still afloat and thus still sinking. He asked for that tugboat, he said, with the thought it might push the ship into solid ground. Eventually satisfied it already was, he finally gave the order to abandon ship at 10:58.
And it started at 9:42?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Lifeboats lined the railings on both sides of deck 4. As we mentioned before. Because the Concordia was listing to starboard, it eventually became all but impossible to lower the boats onto the port side, the side facing open water. They would just bump against the lower decks. As a result, the vast majority of those who evacuated the ship by lifeboat departed from the starboard side. Each boat was designed to hold 150 passengers. By the time Schettino had called to abandon ship, roughly 2,000 people had been standing on deck 4 for an hour or more waiting. The moment the crewmen began opening the lifeboat gates, chaos had finally broken out. It was every man, woman, and child for themselves, says one of the people on the life raft or on the cruise ship. We had an officer in our lifeboat, Flesser had said, that was the only thing that kept people from totally rioting. I ended up being first, then Brian, and then Alana. I don't know. There was a man who was trying to elbow Alana out of the way, he recalls, and she pointed at me yelling in Italian that that's her dad. And I saw her feet on the deck above me and I pulled her in by her ankles. Whew. The thing I remember most is people's screams, the cries of the women and children, said one of the hairdressers that was on board. Children who couldn't find their parents, women who wanted to find their husbands, children were there on their own.
I didn't even think about that part. Like, it would be terrifying if, I'm like, hey, I'm going to run down to the casino, and Will's like, I'm going to take a nap. I never even thought about that part either.
Yeah. Because you're not always with your other person, or if you were trying to figure out where they were at the time too. I couldn't imagine. And if everyone's fighting, like someone was like, I don't feel bad, but I hit someone in the face, like to get on the like, what do you do?
Yeah.
And the thing is a life raft specifically, there's enough, here's the issue, right? So there's enough life rafts on every single cruise ship to get everyone off safely. The problem was that the ship took on water, that he did what he did, and that it started to list and fall over on one side, which means all of them on it. So half of the life rafts wouldn't work. Mm-hmm. And now the other ones on the other side are just hitting up against it. So you don't have any way of getting those life rafts off the ship without it smashing the side of the ship down it into the water. Oh. And they're set into it so that people would be able to easily get into them if the ship was upright, but it wasn't. So they lost half of them, and then they couldn't get people in them, and then you couldn't get the life rafts off the ship.
Oh my God.
Someone at our muster station called out women and children first, this other person recalls, and that really increased the panic level, he said. The families who were sticking together, they were being pulled apart. The women don't want to go without their husbands, and the husbands don't want to lose their wives. After being momentarily separated by his wife, this guy Smith pushed his way onto a lifeboat, which dangled about 60 feet above the water. Immediately, however, the crew had problems lowering it. This is the first part where I thought my life was in danger, Smith goes on. The lifeboats have to be pushed out and lowered down. We weren't being lowered down slowly and evenly from both directions. The stern side would fall suddenly by 3 feet, then the bow by 2 feet, port and starboard would tilt sharply to one side or the other. It was very jerky and it was terrifying. The crew members were shouting at each other. They couldn't figure out what they were doing. Eventually, to Smith's dismay, the crewman, they gave up. They cranked the lifeboat back onto the deck and they herded the passengers back onto the ship.
Wow.
Because they couldn't get it off.
Holy shit.
Yeah. This one is crazy. They just started jumping off the ship. So I jumped feet first. I couldn't see much. I began swimming, but every 50 feet, I would stop and look back. I could hear the ship creaking and was scared that it would fall on top of me as it capsized completely.
Yeah.
I swam for a few minutes and reached the island, and then they just sat on a rock.
Wow.
And then they had like kids who couldn't swim, or like 71-year-old parents who couldn't do it. And like, here's a French couple, Francis and Nicole Servel. They jumped as well. After Francis, who was 71, gave Nicole his life jacket because she couldn't swim. As she struggled toward the rock, she yelled, "Francis." And he replied, "Don't worry, I'll be fine." And he drowned, and she never saw him again.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Like,
the first lifeboats limped into the harbor a few minutes after 11. By the time that Giglio's deputy mayor, Mario Pellegrini, reached the harbor, townspeople had begun to collect on the stones. We were all looking at the ship trying to figure out what happened. We thought it must be an engine breakdown of some kind. Then we saw the lifeboats dropping down and the first ones began to arrive in the port. Local schools and churches were open and the first survivors were hustled inside and given blankets. Every free space began to fill. Imagine that too. It was February.
That's what I was going to ask you.
The water was really, really cold. Yeah.
And like, I can swim, but I mean, that's a pretty, I don't know. You got to be in pretty good shape to swim that far.
The mayor was like, I didn't know what to do, so I literally just jumped on one of those life rafts, and he didn't have a minute to think, and he was going back to the ship.
Try to get more people?
The mayor. I just want to say that. The mayor.
Yeah.
Like, just a fucking Tom Watson over here hopping on, like, I'm going to figure something out. But the captain of the ship isn't doing shit. We'll find out.
Okay.
Reaching the ship, Pellegrini grabbed a rope ladder dangling from a lower deck, and as soon as I got on board, I started looking for someone in charge. There were just crew members standing and talking on deck 4 with the lifeboats. They had no idea what was going on. I said, "I'm looking for the captain or someone in charge. I'm the deputy mayor. Where's the captain?" Everyone goes, "I don't know. There's no one in charge." I was running around like that for 20 minutes. I ran through all the decks. I eventually emerged on top where the swimming pool is. Finally, I found the guy in charge of hospitality. He didn't have any idea what was going on either. At that point, the ship was really tilting all that bad. Like, it was easy to load people onto the lifeboat, so I went down and started to help out there. For the next half hour or so, lifeboats are shuttling people to the harbor. When a few returned to the starboard side, scores of passengers were at the port side sprinting through the darkened passageways to cross the ship and reach them. Amanda Warwick, she was an 18-year-old Boston student, lost her footing on the slanting. Obviously, the deck is super slippery, and she fell down a small stairwell where she found herself in knee-deep water. The water was actually rising, she says. It was pretty scary. Somehow carrying a laptop computer and a camera, she managed to fucking get out on one of the boats.
Oh my God.
Not everyone else is as lucky.
Yeah.
While there was plenty of chaos aboard the Concordia that night, what few people noted was, despite like the confused crew members and the lifeboats, all the passengers are in panic. The first stage of the evacuation proceeded in a more or less orderly fashion. Between 11, when the first lifeboats dropped into the water, and 12:15, a window of an hour and 15 minutes, roughly 2/3 of the people on board the ship had made it to safely. Unfortunately, everything went wrong there.
Oh, no.
So now a helicopter is arriving into the mainland at 11:45. It carried a doctor, a paramedic, and 2 rescue swimmers from another place in Italy's fire and rescue service. A van whisked them from Giglio's airport to the port where the swimmers, which was someone named Stefano, who was 49, and a 37-year-old Paolo. They pushed through the crowds, boarded a police launch, and changed into orange wetsuits. Before them, the Concordia, now listing at a 45-degree angle, was lit by spotlights from a dozen small boats bobbing at its side. The launch headed from the port bow, where people had been jumping into the water. As it approached, a Filipino crewman on a high deck suddenly leaped from the ship, falling nearly 30 feet into the sea. Stefano and I swam about 30 meters to rescue him. They had said that he was in shock, very tired, and freezing cold. We took him ashore and then went back to the ship. So, like, imagine the chaos.
Yeah, and a rescue swimmer, 37 and 49 years old, by the way.
I know,
for
right?
them.
We can do whatever we want.
Yeah, good for them. But that's
You also have to think, too, it's whoever was available. People were probably calling people that they knew.
Mm-hmm.
In the first of 6 trips the 2 divers took, they would make it that they would do in the next, like, 6 hours. The second trip, they pulled a 60-year-old French woman floating in her life jacket near the bow, the bow, and they go, "Are you okay?" He said in French, and she goes, "I'm fine." Then she said, "I'm not fine." Next, they pulled a second French woman in an advanced state of hyperthermia. She was shaking uncontrollably. She was conscious, but her face was violet, and her hands were violet, and her fingers were white.
Oh, my God.
Her circulatory system was shutting down. She kept saying, "My husband, Jean-Pierre, my husband." We took her ashore and went back. On the fourth trip, they lifted an unconscious man into the police launch. This was probably the woman's husband, Jean-Pierre. That was the night's first confirmed dead. He had died of hypothermia in the water. By 12:15, almost everyone on the Concordia's starboard side had fled the ship. Among the last to go were Captain Schettino and a group of officers. After leaving the bridge, Schettino had gone to his cabin to grab some of his things. Before rushing, he said, to help the lifeboats.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure he rushed.
Minutes later, the Concordia began to row slowly to starboard, falling almost onto its side. For a moment, there was complete chaos as many of those still on the starboard side, including the second and third mates, were forced to dive into the water and swim for the rocks.
Oh, my.
It was at that point Schettino famously claimed that he lost his footing and fell onto the roof of a lifeboat. The captain later said his lifeboat plucked 3 or 4 people from the water.
So he
left the ship. He was never ships are never supposed to leave.
Yeah.
And he famously says that he slipped and fell into a life raft.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh. I'm sure he did.
Moments before the ship rode, Giglio's mayor, right, Mario Pellegrini, he went through the passageway. He was crossing the ship in an effort to help those still on the port side. When we finished putting them on the boats, there was hardly anyone left on the right side of the boat. That's when the ship started to tilt more, so I ran through a corridor to the other side of the ship, and over there were lots of people, hundreds, more than probably 500.
Oh, my God.
When the ship began to roll, I couldn't understand what was going on. The moment was so violent, says Pellegrini. Suddenly, it was difficult to stand. It was very disorienting. If you took a step forward, you fell. You couldn't tell which way was up or down. You couldn't walk. All the people were forced against the walls. That's when the panic hit, and the electricity went out as well. Lights winking all over. And when the ship stopped moving, we were in the dark, just the moon. The light of the full moon. As everyone was screaming, the ship's chief doctor, Sandro something, was already on the port side. The ship actually fell gently, he recalls. That was the worst time. People were trapped in the middle of the ship as it turned and the water began to rise. When it came to rest once more, its landscape was hopelessly skewed. With the ship lying almost on its right side, walls now became floors. Hallways became vertical shafts. Pellegrini was on deck 4 in a covered corridor with about 150 passengers. Beyond was an open deck where another 500 or so were struggling to regain their footing. When he was able to stand, he glanced into the corridor behind. Now below him, we can all figure out that.
Yeah.
And to his horror, he could see that the seawater was surging towards him as it was all across the starboard side of the ship, inundating the lowest decks and gushing into the restaurants on deck 4. This was almost certainly the single deadliest moment of the night when at least 15 people probably drowned. That's when I started getting afraid for myself, he said. And there were people still down there. You could hear them screaming.
Could you imagine?
Oh my God. He said that the screams seemed to be emanating from behind a single hatchway. He worked with that doctor and another crewman to throw their weight into lifting the door, which was now on the floor. There were people down there. It was like they were all in a well filling up with water. A crewman grabbed a rope and, swiftly making knots in it, dropped in down to those trapped below. 4 or 5 of us all began pulling people out from below. They came up one at a time. The first one came out. She was a woman. She was so surprised she came up feet first.
What?
Because everything was just fucking ass backwards.
Yeah.
I don't fucking know. I had to reach down and pull her out. We took out 9 people in all. The first one had been in water up to her waist. The last one, it was up to his neck.
Oh my God. Oh my.
I'm quoting this, so please don't hate me. The worst was an American guy, really fat, like 250 pounds, tall and obese. He was hard to get out. The last one was a waiter. His eyes were terrified. The water was freezing. The water was so cold, he couldn't have survived much longer. He told us there were others behind him, said the doctor, but he could no longer see him. The ship's roll trapped scores of passengers. Earlier, this guy, Dean, and his wife, Georgia, and their 2 daughters, which were 31 and 23, had boarded a lifeboat on the port side, but were forced to return on the ship because that's when the fucking life rafts couldn't be released. Crossing the starboard, they were standing in a darkened hallway, inching forward near the end of a long line of people when he heard the crash of plates and glasses and the ship started to move. That's when people, again, began to scream. The family fell on their side. Sorry, that would be weird. The family fell to the floor. Dean felt sure the ship was turning completely over as seen in a movie, The Poseidon Adventure. I don't know that one, do you?
No.
To his amazement, it didn't. Once the ship settled, they were able to find themselves stomach down in a steep incline. Army crawling their way upward to the port side, which was now above their heads. They grabbed a railing and managed to pull themselves almost all the way to the open deck to the top. But like 5 feet short of the opening, the railing suddenly stopped. We started trying to pull ourselves up. He said he was a retired teacher. We got up against the wall, and that's when my daughter Cindy said, I'm going to launch myself up, push me up, and I'll grab a railing. She did it. She did the others. I knew they couldn't pull up because they couldn't pull me up because I'm larger. So I pulled myself into a frog position, and I jumped as high as I could. He made it. But even then, with dozens of people slipping and sliding all around with them and no officers in sight, he couldn't see a way off the ship. I knew we were going to die. We just all started praying.
Oh, man.
Someone called from below, turning, and they saw a young Argentinian couple, clearly exhausted, holding a toddler. They didn't have the energy to jump upward. And the woman was like, please take my child. And she did. And Georgia, the wife, she gave the baby back because she was like, we're all going to die and your baby should die in your arms. Like I could cry. Right?
What is wrong with
Right.
you? Oh my God.
She literally was like, just take your baby so that we can all just die with our families. And they all lived. Just so you know.
And now the baby's name is Georgia.
No, right?
Like,
They changed the baby's name.
They changed her name.
Dean is trying to figure out, that's the dad. He's like, I'm trying to figure out what the next move is. Benji and his wife had already crossed the port side and mid like the ship area. A crewman urged them to go back. No, this side is sinking. And they're like, we can't go there. So the crewman's like, go back that way. And they're like, this side is full of water. Like, what do you want me to do? After a few minutes, Smith had startled to see his in-laws approach. On a crewman's order, they'd returned to their rooms and, unable to understand the English language announcements, had remained inside so long they missed the lifeboats. At that point, Smith recalls, we were listing so severely the walls were slowly turning into floors. And that's whenever we realized we need to make a quick decision. If we want to jump, we won't be able to. Boats were bobbing far below at this point. Anyone who leapt from a port railing would simply land further down on the hull. Somehow, Smith saw they had to get closer to the boats. The only obvious way down was along the outer hull, now tilted at a steep angle. It was like a giant slippery slide, but one that they felt was too dangerous to use. So let me explain that. The ship has already sunk. It's on its side. They had to claw their way to get to the top of it. Mm-hmm. They need to get to the water, and they don't know how. If they jump, they'll jump right onto the side of the ship and die that way.
Yeah.
So they're thinking if we went to the front of the ship, the hull, they could slide down it. But it's the entire length of a 17-foot ship. Yeah. So the ship had 17 feet, right? Or 17 stories. Thank you.
Yeah. I was like,
every ship that you see on a cruise ship, there's 3 to 4 stories underneath that ship. Oh my so it was even longer than that.
Holy shit.
Yeah. So he tried to tie a series of knots onto this rope, and he was hoping that even though his frightened relatives, that they could like rappel down the hole. Mm-hmm. And they hugged each other and they said their goodbyes. And he told everyone that he loved him. And we felt, all of us, that they were going to die in that moment. He was among the first on the side with the ship listing to the starboard. The angle wasn't that steep. In 2 bounds, he made it to deck 3 below. His family followed. Looking up, he saw worried faces just staring down at him. The language barriers made it really hard to talk. He ended up retying the rope to the railing on deck 3, thinking that they could climb down this rope and position themselves to jump into the water or to the boats. They started climbing down the rope, all 6 of us, and then above us, a steady stream of people began to follow. So go for fucking them. There were 40 people hanging onto this rope at the ship's midsection by the time like all of this happened. What they should do next, no one fucking knew.
Yeah, I was like, now what?
They're literally just making up shit to fucking rappel down. I have no idea.
Yeah. Is there like a movie about this or like a show or something?
There's a documentary about it, but it was the one that I found was them talking about how they were getting the ship back up. At the end of the day, when all of this ends, there's a huge fucking cruise ship. Yeah. Stuck on that. They had to take it off piece by piece. Yeah. Wow. The sad reminder of it was there for years.
I bet.
So they end up calling all of the pilots in too. And now you have pilots who are trying to like bring everyone up. if you can imagine that. So since the ship was listing, they have these helicopters above it trying to like pick people off the ship, if you will.
Holy shit. How do you train for that in pilot school?
I don't know.
I don't know. They're like, well, I guess let's give it a go.
They said moving toward the bow. So the bow is the front, the aft is the ass. They saw clusters of people who were waving for help. They basically start grabbing these people and harnessing them and allowing himself to like bring people up into the helicopter. He said what really struck me was the total silence of these 56 people. He remembers. The look on their faces were totally fixed, just an empty look. They were in a state of unreality. It was very dark. I asked if anyone was injured. No one was hurt seriously. I tried my best to calm them down. I'm guessing what happened there is that he had actually like gotten off the helicopter and was like trying to find people on the ship.
Yeah. I mean, just thinking that you're going to die and then getting rescued all of a sudden. I don't know. I mean, that's pretty heavy.
I couldn't imagine. Mm-hmm. Like by everything that's happened, I couldn't imagine. I would 100% think that I was going to die. And my only goal would be like, at least I'm going to die with you. You know, it's like, fuck it. At least you're going to die with your family. And I think that's probably the like silence that everyone was experiencing. So he radioed in the situation. A second diver, Marco, joined them on the bridge. It was clear that the older passengers were in no shape to walk far. They decided to begin winching people up to the helicopters. And they chose an especially shaken Spanish woman. She was about 60 to go first. She didn't want to leave her husband, he recalls. I told her, don't worry about it. As soon as I get you on board, I will come back for your husband. By the time he was ready to return to Concordia, the pilot had spotted two passengers in a precarious position sitting on an open door 25 feet above the bridge. We just saw flashing lights, so we followed the lights down. Reaching the open door, we found two Asian crew members begging for rescue. Their faces, they were just so terrified. They were in such a dangerous position. I had to give them priority. It was very tricky because the space was so tight. Every moment that the helicopter was basically put at risk. If it moved just a little, the passengers would strike the side of the ship and they would be crushed.
Oh.
Including him.
I didn't even think about that part.
Yeah, he said, I went down and began to try to rescue them, but I kept slipping. The floor was so slippery. The ship was so tilted. The first guy got him onto the strap, but he couldn't stay still. I had to keep pushing his arms down so he wouldn't fall out of the horse collar is what it's called. When I finally got him up, the helicopter, he just fainted. He returned to the ship and had just begun winching the second crew member when, to his surprise, a porthole suddenly opened and a ghostly face appeared. And he was like, fuck. He raised a clenched fist, signaling the winch operator to stop lifting him. The face belonged to one of the 5 passengers who were stuck in a lower deck with no way out. A porthole is just a small glass window.
Oh.
Yeah. Then the pilot told me we only had 2 minutes left. They were running out of fuel. So he took that woman, said, I'll come back and get your husband.
Yeah.
There were all those people, 56 people in there. Then they found the other 2 crew members, got one up who fainted. Then they went back down and found more crew members stuck where they couldn't get him out. And now they have 2 minutes.
Oh, my God.
With 3 passengers now on board, they had to wheel into the night sky and they headed back to refuel. Before his lifeboat had reached the rocks, Captain Schettino's cell phone rang once more. Let's go back to where the captain was.
Yeah.
This time, it was one of the Coast Guard supervisors in Livorno. It was 12:42. We've abandoned ship, Schettino told him. DeFalco was startled. You've abandoned ship? He asked. Schettino, no doubt, sensing that this guy was like, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah.
I did not abandon the ship. We were thrown into the water. When DeFalco put down the phone, he started at the officers beside him in amazement. This violated every tenet of maritime tradition, not to mention Italian law. The captain had abandoned ship with hundreds of people on board, people who trusted him. This was an extremely serious thing, not just because it's a crime. And for a moment, he struggles to find a word. This, he goes on, is an infamy. To abandon women and children, it's like a doctor who abandons his patients. The lifeboat carrying Schettino and his officers did not head to the harbor. Instead, it disgorged its passengers to the nearest land along the rocks at that point, Gabarinara. A few dozen people were already there, most of them having swum. I noticed swam. It says swum.
I don't know.
Swum felt weird. Swam? They swam there.
When in doubt, change the words.
Right.
They did the backstroke. I don't know.
I'm like Vanity Fair probably didn't do the word right.
Yeah.
But I feel like...
I mean, I'll send an email.
They said that I noticed that the captain did not help in any way, a crewman told investigators, neither in the recovery of people in the water nor in coordinating rescue operations. He remained on the rocks watching the ship sink.
I hate him.
Oh, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. I'm going to, for the sake of the time of this, know that a lot of horrible shit continues to happen.
And you already said the article
I do
want to use. So
yeah. Oh, yeah.
You can
Look
read
this
the
up.
whole article.
So let me tell you what happens here. Not long after, at 1:46, the angry Coast Guard officer, DeFalco.
The one.
Get ready for this.
Okay, good.
He telephoned Schettino once more. The captain was still sitting on his rock, staring gloomily at the Concordia. DeFalco had heard that there was a rope ladder hanging from the bow of the ship. Schettino, he began. There are people trapped on board. Now you go with your boat under the prow on the starboard side. There's a rope ladder. You go on board and then you will tell me how many people are there. Is that clear? I'm recording this conversation, Captain Schettino. Schettino tried to object, but DeFalco wasn't having it. You go up that rope ladder, get on that ship, and tell me how many people are still on board and what they need. Is that clear? I'm going to make sure you get in trouble. I'm going to make sure you pay for this. Get the fuck on board. Captain, please. Schettino begs. No, please. You get moving and get on board now. Right. I'm here with the rescue boats. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. What are you doing, Captain? I'm here to coordinate the rescue. What are you coordinating there? Go on board. Are you refusing? They bickered another minute, but you realize it's dark and I can't see anything. Schettino pleads. And so what? DeFalco demanded. You want to go home, Schettino? It's dark and you want to go home? Schettino offered more excuses. DeFalco cut him off one last time. Go immediately. Later, I asked DeFalco's boss, which is Cosma. This is hard names, guys. Whether he thought the captain was in shock. I don't know. They told me he didn't seem very lucid. A half hour or so after this last call from the Coast Guard, a rescue boat plucked Schettino from his rock and ferried him to the harbor because he wouldn't help. He talked to police for a bit, then found a priest who later said the captain in a daze cried for a very long time. By 1 a.m., the Concordia was now lying almost flat on its side. Between 700 and 1,000 people remained on board. Clumps of people were scattered throughout the ship, many clinging to railings. About 40 were hanging on that rope amidship. My God. Almost everyone else had congregated in a panicky crowd of 500 or more towards the stern on the port side of the deck, facing the sea. Many of these had taken refuge in a cramped passageway. Others remained on the deck outside. Dozens of boats had gathered about 60 feet below. The Coast Guard later counted 44 different craft in use by dawn, and there was no easy route to them. To date, no one identified exactly who found the long rope ladder and tossed it down the water. One of the boatmen below, the tobacco shop owner, recalls a Filipino crewman who scaled up and down it several times trying to coordinate a rescue. According to Mario Pellegrini, who was the fucking mayor, that the two crewmen worked with him to supervise the abandoning escape attempt, the doctor that we had talked about, and then also that Simone Canessa, who we had talked about, which was the same officer who early in the evening told the Coast Guard the ship had suffered only a blackout. Their role in the evacuation has not been mentioned publicly yet. According to Pellegrini, he was the single most effective crewman still working to evacuate the ship during the long nights, most harrowing hours. So the crewman who lied because he was told to.
Yeah.
Was one of the most intense people in making sure that people got out.
Well, I'm glad that he made up for. He was doing what he was told.
He ends up saying, "I'm not a hero. I did my job." And he did a very brief telephone interview with Vanity Fair. I did everything I could to save everyone I could, is what they said. It was Canessa, that person, Pellegrini believes, who found an aluminum ladder and leaned it skyward onto the outer railing of deck 4, which was now above their heads. A passenger could climb this ladder to the railing above, then grabbing the rope ladder, scoot on his rear down the hull onto the boats. It was risky but doable. The problem was establishing an orderly procedure. The only way out for everyone was this small aluminum ladder for 1,000 people.
Yeah, that's what I was getting ready to ask you.
When the ship fell and panic first hit, everyone threw themselves at this ladder. They had no regard to anyone else. It was horrible. I just remember all the children crying. A crowd is an ugly monster if there's panic, said the doctor, who tried to in vain to calm people. No one was listening to me. They were running up and down, slipping, ready to throw themselves in. And there were a lot of children. You couldn't convince them to calm down. People were out of their minds. The fathers, who are often more fragile than the mothers, were losing it, while the mothers were trying to maintain a certain level of calm. Rock on, women.
Right?
Fuck yeah.
Man.
To fast forward through that, eventually they got people to calm down, and they got everyone down the little ladder, and they didn't lose a single person, including all those children of that group. At the bottom of the rope ladder, the boats took turns picking up the exhausted passengers and helping them jump down the last 5 or 6 feet to safety. They ended up ferrying at least 160 of them into the harbor to safety. Not everyone made it to safety, however. Among those lending help on deck 4 was the kindly 56-year-old hotel director, Manrico Giampendroni. As people shimmied down the hull, Giampendroni spied a group at the far end of the ship. I wanted to go and rescue these people, he told a magazine, because at times a word of comfort, the sight of a uniform or a friendly person is enough to inspire courage. Staying in a group is one thing. Alone is much more difficult. I headed to the bow, walking on the walls. The ship was so tilted, you had to stay on the walls. As he walked, he tapped on the doors now at his feet, listening for responses that never came. He didn't bother trying any of them. They all opened for the first time, or so he thought. He had just stepped on a door outside the restaurant when, to his dismay, it gave way. Suddenly, he was falling into darkness. He slammed into a wall about 15 feet down, then tumbled down what felt like half the ship, finally landing ominously into seawater above his neck. He felt a stabbing pain in his left leg. He had broken it in 2 places.
Oh, God.
When his eyes adjusted to the darkness, he realized he was inside the restaurant, which was now a vast, freezing swimming pool with floating tables and chairs, and that the water was rising. He managed to crawl atop the metal base of a table, balancing himself on one leg as he shouted and shouted for help, but no one came. The line of people on the rope, remember that rope?
Yeah.
They were there for a solid 2 hours, bathed in a spotlight from the other boats. And it was cold. Their arms ached. They were holding onto a fucking rope for 2 hours. When the helicopters hovered overhead, everyone shouted and waved their arms. The boats didn't know what to do, how to get close. Finally, one of the lifeboats came back. The crew had to stabilize it, but with all the waves from the other boats, it kept crashing into the ship. And it had this little gate like 3 feet wide. We needed to jump down 3 or 4 feet into the gate, but the boat was moving back and forth and crashing into the hole. So someone could easily lose their legs if they didn't jump just right.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
The crewmen below tried holding on to the end of the rope, but when the boat lurched, so did the rope, triggering panicked shouts up and down the length. Finally, Smith and his wife, along with several others, decided to leap onto the fucking roof of the lifeboat. The roof of the lifeboat.
Oh, my God.
We heard this crunching noise when we landed, he says, but we made it. I don't even know what that means.
Oh, God.
They slowly helped others off the rope, and this is how 120 other people escaped unharmed. By 5 o'clock, almost all of the 4,200 passengers and crew had made it off the ship, by lifeboat, jumping into the water, or scuttling down the ropes and ladders on the port side. Rescue divers had returned and winched 15 more people into the helicopters. The last passengers on the bridge were slowly led down to the rope ladder. Fire rescue teams had begun climbing onto the ship, looking for stragglers. As they searched, the only people they found were Mario Pellegrini, Simone Canessa, the doctor, Sandro Cinquini, and a Korean hostess who had slipped and broken her ankle. I put it in plaster, says Cinquini. I hugged her the whole time because she was shaking. Then a short time later, everything was done. The 4 of us could go down, but the deputy mayor stayed. Once everything was done, keep in mind, it's not even his people.
Yeah.
Like the mayor, it wasn't his people. It
Yeah.
was just outside of his neighborhood. Mm-hmm. Unbelievable. Once everything was done, there was a bit of calm, says Pellegrini. Canessa and I took a megaphone and we started calling to see if anyone was still on board, up and down deck 4. We did this twice. We opened all the doors. Is anyone here? We didn't hear any response. They were among the last to leave the Concordia. Pellegrini climbed down the rope ladder and a few minutes later found himself standing safely on the harbor's stone esplanade. As the sun began to rise, he turned to Cinquini. Come on, doctor. I'll buy you a beer, he said. And that's exactly what he did.
That's
all that night and into the dawn, hundreds of exhausted passengers stood along the harbor or huddled inside Giglio's church and the adjacent Hotel Bahamas, where the owner, Paolo, emptied every bottle in his bar for free and fielded every call from all the reporters all across the world.
Holy crap.
So imagine just they own the hotel, bring everyone in. They gave everyone drinks, like try to take care of everyone. By mid-morning, passengers began boarding ferries for the long road home. It was then around 11:30. By the way,
I was like, pause that. Could you imagine having to get back on a boat? Did you say that they got back on a boat just now?
Yeah.
I'd be like, nah, I'm good. I live here now. I live here now. I'm moving to the mayor's garage. Like,
I couldn't imagine. No, I couldn't imagine either.
No, hell no.
So they were all trying to get home, right? That's
Yeah.
all they wanted to do. Around 11:30, Captain Schettino materialized at the hotel alone, asking for a pair of dry socks.
Fuck your socks.
A TV crew spotted him and had just stuck a microphone in his face when a woman, apparently a cruise line official, appeared and herded him away. All day Saturday, the rescue workers fanned out across the ship looking for survivors. Sunday morning, they found a pair of South Korean newlyweds in their stateroom. Safe but shivering.
Oh, safe.
They had slept through the impact, waking up to find the hallway so steeply inclined they couldn't navigate it. Somehow, though, they lived.
I don't even know what.
Somehow, unfortunately as well, because I like the word somehow, no one found poor Manrico Giampindroni, the hotel director, who remained perched on that table above the water in the Milano restaurant. He could hear the emergency crews and banged a saucepan to try to get their attention. There was no use. When the water rose, he managed to crawl to a dry wall. He stayed there all day Saturday, his broken leg throbbing. He was sipping on cans of Coke and a bottle of cognac that was floating by. Finally, around 4 a.m. on Sunday, a fireman heard his shouts. It took them 3 hours to lift him from his watery little perch. He hugged the fireman for all he was worth. He was airlifted to a mainland hospital, and he was the last person taken off the ship alive.
Oh, my God.
The toll of the dead and missing climbed to 32. By mid-March, all but 2 of their bodies had been found. A few, it appears, perhaps 7 or 8, died after jumping into the water, either from drowning or hypothermia. Most, however, were found inside the ship, suggesting they had drowned when it had rolled over a little bit after midnight. A Hungarian violinist, Sandor Feher, helped several children put on life jackets before heading back to his cabin to pack his instrument. He had drowned. One of the most heartbreaking stories involved the only child to die. I remember this part. A 5-year-old Italian girl named Diana Arlotti, who had drowned with her father, William. He had severe diabetes, and the two may had gone back to the cabin to retrieve his medication. Unfortunately, Mario Pellegrini, the mayor, he thought that might have been the panicked father and daughter he saw late that night running back and forth on deck 4 looking for help.
Oh, no.
They say that, it's one of the things, if something happens on a cruise ship, you're supposed to go back and get your medication. That's one of the first things you do is get your medication if you have it. So that was just so fucking sad. 3 months after the disaster, investigations into the wreck of the Costa Concordia had to move forward. Captain Schettino, who remains under house arrest at his home near Naples. He would face multiple charges of manslaughter and illegally abandoning a ship once formally indicted. Persistent leaks suggest that another half dozen officers, as well as officials at Costa Concordia Cruises, could eventually face charges. In March, a dozen survivors and their families filed into a theater in the coastal city of Grosseto to give testimony. Outside, the streets were jammed with reporters. Few believed they would see justice for those who died aboard the Costa Concordia, at least not anytime soon. At the end of all of this, one man predicted, "It will all be for nothing. You wait and see." The Concordia itself remains where it fell that night on the rocks at Point Jabaranara. Salvage workers finally managed to drain its fuel tanks in March, lessening the possibility of environmental damage, but the ship will take it took a year to remove it.
I was going to ask that.
If you study it today from the harbor at Giglio, there's something unearthly about the ship, a sense, however slight, that it was suddenly appeared by a bygone era when ships still sank and people died. There was something that several survivors remarked on afterward, that amazingly, in a world of satellites and laser-guided weapons and instant communication, almost anywhere on Earth, ships could still sink. And that is the story of the sinking of Costa Concordia.
I think I heard about it a little bit, but that was, it was sad.
It was sad. The way that it portrayed when you were living through it was truly, truly an asshole captain got a little buzzed up with his mistress, decided to be cocky and arrogant, made a mistake, tried to cover it up, then abandoned the ship and did nothing to inform people what was happening so that no one would have died. No one would have died. Yeah. No one would have died if he didn't make those mistakes and not care and not do anything about it.
Well,
he's serving 80 years in prison.
I was getting ready to ask you that also.
80 motherfucking years.
Good. You know what everybody's doing? What do I always say?
Hold in someone's pocket. I'm going to look it up real quick. I'd Google him.
If he's holding a pocket.
Jeez. Captain. I had looked it up.
Captain. Fuckbag.
Man, we were watching him. So imagine when it happened and then everything started coming out. Oh my God. Yeah. Oh my God. And then everyone hated him. And like to hear the black box recording, like it went like, I remember hearing that recording. I heard it.
Ooh.
Where the guy's like, are you fucking refusing basically? Like, are you saying no?
I think I would like to hear that part at least. Just
Go for it. Criminal status. He is currently incarcerated.
He's currently incarcerated.
Yes, I believe. He still says he didn't fucking drink alcohol that night. Fucking.
Of course he did.
I know.
Of course he said that.
I mean, he lied about it. You're totally right, sis. On February 11th, 2015, after a 19-month trial, he read the verdict sentencing, I was totally wrong, Schettino to 16 years in prison and 5 years of interdiction from navigating. That sounded weird.
So, like, he can't do anything with the ship? What? No.
Oh, that's what he is going to be 80 years old. Sorry. I was like, where did I get 80 from? And it's like he remains incarcerated in prison just outside of Rome, where he's expected to stay until he's around 80 years old. That's what really fucking matters to me at the end of it. Like, you're going to be an old man, not fucking 25-year-olds.
Yeah, I hope your fling was worth it. I'm about to read about that part.
Yeah. Everyone got really obsessed with her because she was beautiful and everyone's assholes. And we all just wanted to it was just so sensationalized. Mm-hmm. It was just so, you couldn't write it. You couldn't make it up.
When did camera phones come out? Like,
I don't know.
I don't know. I'm just trying to think back. Like,
there's video of it. Now there's video of what was happening on the ship.
No.
We watched all that too.
Oh my God.
Yeah. We had a campaign that was Australia. Like when I got to work that day.
We as in you at
Royal Caribbean.
Yeah.
When we got to work that day, we had meetings. Like, and I was back then I was just a travel agent. I was just I was just booking fucking cruises.
Yeah.
And it was just devastating. It was so devastating. And not shocking because I've never held Carnival Cruise Lines in high regard ever. I never will. And we had a campaign that was like in Australia, they were talking, everything said that Down Under. And it was like this huge, ferocious marketing initiative to get down under. Like, we want to see you down under. And it was talking about and it was like having to change all the verbiage on the websites and everything because a cruise ship sank.
Yeah, that would be bad timing.
Well, whoever thought a cruise ship would sink?
I mean, yeah.
Ever.
Me now. I don't.
Thank God it was where it was and it wasn't out to sea where everyone would have died.
Right.
Because you would have been stuck in the water. Just stuck in the water.
Let me get back to you on that cruise invitation.
Oh, it's unlikely. I say that, but I mean, fires happen more than anything.
Okay. Then
Did you know that there's a jail?
What?
There's jails in every cruise ship. Every cruise ship has a jail.
There is?
And a morgue.
Huh?
Yeah.
Really?
It has to. Because people do fucking unruly shit.
Disneyland and just sweep it under the Mickey Mouse rug?
People die. You know, that sucks. But people die on cruise ships.
The resort that shall be named nameless, people used to come there to pass away.
Yeah. They deal with cruise lines too.
I figure that would be the same.
Yeah.
Man.
Ain't that some wild shit?
God.
That was sad.
I know.
It was very heavy. It was very long, guys. Sorry that was such a long story.
No,
but
it was good.
The perspective of the people on board, I think, was really important as I kind of like battered through it. But it felt very battered to me.
The fact that you can do that and read all that and read that fast and that well, I would have to like get up, take a break. I would have had to, go outside, stretch my legs, come back in. And you're just like, here we go.
Here we do go.
And you went and it was good. You're a good story. I like when you read to me.
Thank
Even though
you.
It didn't even sound like you were reading. It felt like you were just telling me.
Well, thank you. It was I will say it was my perspective of the Vanity Fair article. But whenever I decided to do it, I forgot how big it was. It was 25 pages. Like I really forgot how big, because the story is what I just told you. Mm-hmm. A captain got a little drunk, had an affair. He was cocky, got too close, wrecked the ship, got off the ship. Like that's what it was. Yeah. But to really understand minute by minute what happened on board is heart-wrenching.
Yeah, you telling the brief overview at the beginning and then diving into it's a little different. So
yeah, it does remind me, like we go to the gym a lot and I'm really proud of us and like what we're doing, but like it's a reminder to be physically fit. I know that sounds so dumb. I know that sounds dumb. But because of stop and realize it though. Like if your life depended on it, do you have the muscle strength to hold onto a rope for 2 hours or to frog jump your ass like vertically up to hold on? Like it's those little things where it's like people make jokes like don't have more muscle than what your job. Like who was it that did that little short guy, the funny short guy?
Patton Oswalt. I don't know.
No, the black funny short guy.
Oh, Kevin Hart.
Yeah, Kevin Hart said that.
He goes 2% body fat.
I know. Well, he always made the joke like, okay, Tom, who's in accounting, like, why are you so strong? Because they're like just super buff. And he makes that joke. And it's like, you want to be strong for life, right?
Yeah.
But God, it's to be able to save yourself in a fucking terrible.
I don't think.
God,
I'm so sore today. I don't think I could save myself from anything.
100% the adrenaline rush of everything too, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But that's what they were saying is everyone was so exhausted and freezing.
Yeah.
God forbid you plopped me in the middle of the Ohio River and had to swim to one side, the experience of that, let alone what they were actually experiencing. Or what deciding when to jump and when to, I don't fucking know. I don't know. You just never know. Man. I know this was a weird wild card, but it was like the sinking of a ship.
I didn't think you were going to go that way.
I know. I knew you wouldn't have guessed this one. I was proud of this one.
And you're like, don't look, and you never get like that.
Yeah, because it was a murder, if you ask me. It was the murder of 32 people.
By a tan, greasy douche canoe.
Yep. Pussy. You know me. I always have to
you gotta say
pussy ass bitch. That's what he was. He was, and everyone else proves that he was.
He looks like he'd sell you a used Saturn that would break down when you pulled it off the lot. That's what he looks like.
I want to say who he reminds me of here in town, but I won't. And Heather's cracking up because he totally reminds me of somebody. There's a lot of skeevy, weird people around. Anywho, that was my sad story.
Yeah.
And this was a nice long one. There's a lot of pauses. I'm sure this won't be nearly as long as I think it is. So our next one.
Surprise. We have a surprise
my God.
for you.
We have a big surprise.
We have a big surprise, and we're going to leave it at that.
Yeah. Just know that the next episode is going to be fucking amazing.
Yes.
Maybe one of the most amazing episodes.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to go with yes. I think you're right.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I'm very excited. All right, everyone.
Rate, review, subscribe, and tell your sister and your mom.
All right, well, we love you guys.
Thanks,
You're so
y'all.
wonderful.
Bye.
Bye.
Theodore, can I pet that dog?